President of the National Association of Health Service Executives, New York Regional Chapter. Welcome to our November program on behalf of our board. Jay, Abigail, Christine, Max, and Maya. I invite you to type your name in the chat and organization you're affiliated with as a way to introduce yourself to all of our participants. For those joining us for the first time this evening, NAHSE is the premier healthcare professional organization for Black healthcare executives. Currently, there are 31 chapters nationally. The New York Regional Chapter, founded in 1968, is one of the 9 founding chapters. In addition to our 6 elected officers, the board of directors consists of 12 committee chairs. Our committee chairs, pictured here, support the chapter in various capacities and are foundational in our organization's mission and vision. This evening, we are in store for a wonderful event. Our discussion will be moderated by Barbara Felker. Barbara serves as Northwell Health Vice President of Strategic Community Partnership in the Brooklyn region. In her role as Vice President, she is responsible for the development and integration of strategic partnerships between legislative representatives, faith-based, and community organizations, and Northwell Health, to introduce the healthcare needs and wellness of diverse cultural and socio-economic communities. Barbara has more than 15 years experience in diverse industries that include talent management, diversity, inclusion, and healthcare equity, labor relations, and state legislation. She served as the legislative director for the New York State Senate upon completion of her fellowship with the Center for Women in Government and Civil Society at the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy. Barbara obtained a Master's of Science in Health Service Administration from the New School's Milano Graduate School of Management and Urban Policy, and a Master of Divinity from the New Brunswick Theological Seminary. As an ordained minister of Word and Sacrament, Reverend Felker serves as pastor of leadership development at the High Bridge Community Church in Bronx, New York. I now turn it to Barbara.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. And just since the pandemic, I was working on the governor's project in Brooklyn to develop a healthcare system out of 3 very financially distressed health systems to formulate one Brooklyn health system. We worked with One Brooklyn Health as consultants. Since then, with the pandemic, I am back into the corporate arena at Northwell Health, and I am working as, again, Vice President of Strategic Community Partnerships before the health system, and leading our community health while we build a division of community and population health. This has been a result of the work that we've done throughout the pandemic with testing for COVID and trying to address the needs of the communities that were disproportionately affected. So I've shifted from Brooklyn back to the overall corporate system. Tonight, we are fortunate to have 3 members of the C-suite, very experienced and very distinguished. I'm going to introduce them, but I would like them to tell a little bit about themselves after I introduce you. Shirley Desmathines Atkinson, Chief Executive Officer at CABS, the Home Attendant Service, also known as Miss D in Brooklyn. Shirley, you want to talk a little bit about your role and your responsibilities?
Good evening. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I thank Carl Marie for inviting me. Barbara, I have been with CAB's Home Attendant Service for 14 years, going on 15. And I think my passion meets purpose leading this organization. And it has been a joyful ride, to say the least, to service my community, which is dear to my heart. So it is a transformation experience, not only for me, for the staff, for the clients that we serve. And I exemplifies CAB's mission of social equity for all, and that includes myself. So I come with 20 years of experience, and I hope to share some good information with the listeners tonight. Thank you for having me.
We are glad to have you, and thank you for participating on this panel. Our second guest is Arthur Janelli, Chief Transformation Officer at Mount Sinai Health System and President of Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital. Welcome, Art.
Thank you, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have two roles, as you've noted, at the Mount Sinai Health System. I run the Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital, which is the hospital located right near Columbia University, servicing principally Morningside Heights, but also West Harlem. And I've been doing that. It's almost 7 years now. It's hard to believe that it's been that long. Prior to my tenure at Mount Sinai Morningside, I ran the Nassau University Medical Center out in Nassau County. In addition to my role running the hospital, I also, under the title of Chief Transformation Officer, which sounds like a big title, it really is focused in three areas. I focus on patient experience. I focus on developing organizational learning and academies in nursing and physician leadership and performance improvement. And I also do work in social determinants and connecting the resources of Mount Sinai or the caregivers at Mount Sinai to community-based organizations to help serve our patients. So that's the background I bring to the table. I'm really looking forward to the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And our final panelist is Pamela Sutton Wallace, Senior Vice President and Regional COO at New York Presbyterian. And Pamela is a recent transplant to New York. Pam, you want to tell us a little bit about your journey here and your role at New York Presbyterian?
Thank you so much, Barbara, and welcome to everyone this evening. Thank you for joining us. As Barbara said, I am probably the newest team member on this entire Zoom call to the New York region. I joined just almost to the date a year ago, New York Presbyterian. At New York Presbyterian, I'm responsible for the Brooklyn and Queens markets, as well as responsible for our physician medical group, which includes employed and faculty-based physicians across our enterprise, including Westchester County. Prior to joining New York Presbyterian, I served as the CEO for University of Virginia Medical Center in Charlottesville. And prior to that, I served for more than 20 years at Duke University Hospital, leaving that organization as the Senior Vice President for Hospital Operations. So needless to say, the last year has been quite an adjustment for a whole host of reasons coming from the Deep South. But thank you, I'm glad to be here tonight.
Yes, we're glad to have you. Well, we have New York on pause. I guess that's to make sure you stay here. All right, we've had quite a bit of things going on at the same time. We have a pandemic, we have a racial injustice movement, and a lot of things happening at the same time. And so as a result of the disproportionate Black and brown mortality of the COVID-19 pandemic and the social injustices across the country, several healthcare systems have publicly taken the position that racism is a public health crisis and that Black lives matter. So Shirley, I want to ask you, in June 2020, the New York City Health Department declared racism a public health crisis. And as a healthcare leader, can you tell us your organization, what they are doing to address the terms of social determinants of health?
Well, Barbara, I wish I could tell you that we were doing something different. We have been leading for equity since 1968 with our nursing home that was established, which was the first minority-owned nursing home in the area of Bedford-Stuyvesant. And later on, we actually established our CABS home attendant in 1979. So for us, you know, we look at racial justice and health equity as a normal course of business for us. It's nothing new. Even though it was established by the New York City Department of Health, which we are under their regulation, but we have been clear on what our message and service has been to the community of Blacks and Latinx in the community that we serve. CABS is a not-for-profit licensed home care service agency based in Brooklyn, but we service the 5 boroughs. And the workers that we have hired, they directed by, provided to, and delivered very low income and moderately, I mean, they are of low income immigrant servicing the community of immigrants, but we do have other populations. So as far as racial justice and health equity, it's never been an issue for us. It's part of our fiber in making sure that service are delivered equally to all of the members of our community. So it's not something new for us, even though it was established by the New York City Department of Health, but it's something that is part of our core values to recognize the population that we serve and meet their needs where they are.
Yeah, your team is right in the homes and a lot of the determinants firsthand.
Their policy with what the Department of Health or those
from your organization's role in input to measure. Some is into hand, but what type?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and that's often the determinants. We all in certain communities, yet it's very social determinants and bad. But let me talk to you about a few important. First, I do want to take, genuinely revelatory and game-changing kind of year. Certainly in the way that we all know, we're all living with the pandemic each and every day, and it's killing a lot of people. It's making a number of people sick, and it's very much disrupting our lives. But I think that the pandemic, as we've discussed here, has also laid bare the differences in how we care for different communities that we serve. And unfortunately, those differences cleave along racial and ethnic lines, and it's made that unavoidable. You can't help but see it, and you're really obligated, if you care about your patients, to do something about it. Relatedly, the George Floyd murder created an outpouring all across the globe, but certainly at the Mount Sinai Health System. We observed several minutes of silence, 9 minutes of silence for George Floyd. And we invited staff to join in that memorial. Thousands of people poured out of all of our hospitals into the streets. And it wasn't just our hospitals. all of the hospitals, certainly in New York. It was really an extraordinary thing, quite frankly, and it's inspired a lot of activity at Mount Sinai. So, Mount Sinai has established a task force to address racism within its organization, and the task force connects our school with our clinical leaders, and we're in the final stages of developing a roadmap for going forward for how we're going to try to address racism internally, and also racism in racial disparities in the outcomes of the care that we deliver. And we're excited to embark on the journey that roadmap is going to lead us to. We included in that roadmap will be work that we've already begun, but we certainly need to accelerate as it relates to social determinants. So at Mount Sinai, we've done work with respect to social determinants of health as part of our DISRIP effort. And we've built coalitions that will endure beyond DISRIP between the Mount Sinai Health System and community-based organizations that are providing the social services that are so important to be able to address the social determinants of health. We are leveraging our EPIC platform and Bertha to try to connect our community-based organizations with Mount Sinai so that we can track closed-loop referrals and really see, what are the services that our patients need? Are they being referred to the right services? Are they following up? And are those services having an impact? We do know that along a number of different measures as part of our district work, we actually really did see that the collaborative efforts between our community-based organizations and Mount Sinai led to significant improvements in the health of the populations that we served who are insured by Medicaid, whether we're talking about reduced overutilization of emergency department services, reduced avoidable admissions, improvements in diabetes care as an example, and other clinical outcomes that we were quite pleased with. But we also know that we've got to be able to do that work once the district money dries up, and we've got to continue to and further those collaborative efforts with our community partners to ensure that we give our patients the best shot at being healthy. Last point I would like to make on this, though, one of the things that we've discovered, and I have a partner at Mount Sinai, Dr. Rob Fields, is doing really good work in this, is that we have, even in New York, we have broadband deserts. And broadband deserts matter because as our care model starts to migrate towards virtual care, and whether it's video and the use of video technology to deliver care, what we're finding is that we have places in the 5 boroughs which don't have access to the broadband that's necessary to be able to access that kind of care. And so one of the conversations that we're having at Mount Sinai is to say, okay, let's not knowingly allow 5 years to go by and somebody to write that first paper to talk about how we have additional disparities in how we deliver healthcare, this time centered around video visits, because we can see it coming. So this is really an important time where the healthcare providers and the city need to work together to patch up those broadband deserts and ensure access for people who don't have that kind of access now, and who also are clearly vulnerable populations that we need to be delivering medical services to. So I wanted to highlight that as well, because I think it's critically important. We know it's a problem. We can see it. We can solve it if the will is there, but the will's got to be there to reach that solution.
Thank you, Art. That's such a great point, because even with access, with telehealth, we have to keep in mind and in the forefront the digital divide. People have a cell phone doesn't mean they have data, or they may not have access. So very critical. Yeah, sure.
I cannot find it.
I think Arthur mentioned within the aspects of social determinants, And as a community-based organization, one way that we are addressing social determinants of health is through our new care management program. And with that care management program, we are able to assist clients with nutrition, medical equipment, assistance with managing and attending medical appointments and housing. And that will help bridge that gap in making sure that clients have access that can enhance their care and improve their quality of life. So that's one of the things that I wanted to add to what Arthur just mentioned, given that we are a community-based organization and we are well-rounding care management towards our home care service.
Yeah, very critical. If this pandemic did not do anything else, it brought the inability to obtain care and access and to the forefront, because we, like you said, Shirley, before, it's not new, but it's something that we realize we don't pay for it in front, you're going to pay for it afterwards. The ICU beds were full of people from these communities, and it was very expensive. So if we invest up front, hopefully we can avoid ever having anything like this happen again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Pam, I want to say you've come from the southern region to the northern region. You've been across the board. I'd like to know, what do you think future healthcare professionals could do to advance diversity and inclusion and equity in the healthcare industry? I know there's different things, different needs in different regions. So just from your experience cross-regional, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an important question, right? Because given my colleagues' kind of response, we think about the enterprise-wide responses, but as we, particularly people of color who are on the call or in NAHSE, as we get invited to the tables, as we take on more and more leadership roles, we have a responsibility to bring with us the perspective of the communities that we're serving. And I say that, I mean, I think most people think, oh, well, that's obvious, right? But I don't think it's always the case. Many of us have worked so hard to get to the table and are often very worried about speaking up on behalf of our communities that we silence ourselves. Or we censor ourselves in conversations where diversity and inclusion must be discussed. And I would charge all of us, regardless of what table we're sitting at, to bring to light how diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging impact the decisions that are being made. Because I think if nothing else, what the George Floyd murder, as well as Breonna Taylor and a whole host of others, and COVID, quite frankly, these are not new issues. These issues have been with us for a very long time, and we have known it in our communities. What we haven't done is talked about it so openly. What we haven't done is seen our leaders take positions that we will no longer tolerate racism as a form of injustice that creates health inequities. And so we need to speak up. I think it's time for us to be willing to have those courageous conversations when we observe behaviors, practices, policies that create inequities across a platform of healthcare. And that's not easy, right? It takes courage. And I think and reflect on my own career and think how many times I censored myself because I didn't want people to say, see, the Black girl always talks about Black stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And at some point, and I think the time is now that we have to get over that. And we have to learn to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves. And not just those who look like us, but also those who aren't at the table, who don't have a voice. And I think particularly LGBTQ community members, I think particularly about those who are not necessarily able-bodied and don't have a voice, particularly there.
Yes, we want a seat at the table, and we can't misuse it or not use it when we get to the table. Art, since we outnumber you on this panel tonight, I'm going to give you this question. What steps has your organization taken to meet or support women in the workplace at the C-suite leadership levels?
Yeah, no, you do outnumber the panel. I think we've done a few things. I mean, Mount Sinai is really committed, the leadership really from the top, both on the academic side, on the part of the dean and the CEO of the health system, are committed to the diversification of leadership ranks, diversification in terms of gender, and diversification in terms of race. And that's a hard, it's unfortunately been hard for the healthcare delivery system to make those changes, but we are committed to it, and we've really begun those efforts for a while now. Many of our top clinical leaders, for example, our clinical chairs, who are, and to be a clinical chair at Mount Sinai, just like being clinical chair at Presbyterian, you've got to have an international reputation, and we have female clinical leaders who are fantastic and internationally known clinicians who have extraordinary publications, extraordinary research backgrounds, and are exceptional strategic leaders of their department. And we see women in these roles throughout the Mount Sinai organization. In addition, we have elevated women to really extraordinarily powerful positions within Mount Sinai. Our chief operating officer in the Mount Sinai Health System is Margaret Pastuchko, is a hugely transformative leader, as well as being brilliant at what it is that she does. And she, in her role, has her hands in virtually everything that's going on within the organization. And I'm proud to work side by side with her and for her, quite frankly, in our efforts, not only relative to COVID, but our efforts to really advance the organization. We just appointed a chief nursing executive who also has a dual role, not only as chief nursing executive, but also as the vice president, senior vice president that runs the operations for the cardiac service line at Mount Sinai. So these are just some examples of women who are really in extraordinary positions of power at Mount Sinai. Our chief medical officer is a woman, as an example. Our vice president for patient experience is a woman. Our chief legal officer is a woman at Mount Sinai. So, there are women who are really in tremendous positions of power and authority, and sit at the table, as you were saying earlier, and are involved in and shape the decisions regarding the future of the Mount Sinai health system. And but we also recognize that as great as those gains are, we have a lot more to do. We have a lot more to do in terms of elevating other women to positions of authority within the Mount Sinai health system, and in diversifying our leadership ranks. And there are a series of initiatives that we're undertaking now to do that. High potential programs, mentoring programs, again, leadership academies in nursing, in physician leadership, and in performance improvement. Really, again, all sorts of fantastic supports to be able to enable people who have not traditionally been at the seats of power in major organizations like Mount Sinai to be at the seats of power, to be sitting in the seats of power at these types of organizations. So we've already made great progress. We're putting in place, I think, really terrific infrastructure to do even more. And I'm really excited to see what Mount Sinai looks like, not just next year, but over the next 5 years, because I think the internal changes that we're fostering are gonna be really exceptional to see. And in the not too distant future, I expect us to be fully at the forefront in promoting women into powerful positions, and people of color into powerful positions in a way that will rival any organization in the country.
Yeah, thank you for that response. Shirley, as the CEO, do you feel that you had support or to reach that top level C-suite position?
I did. Fortunately for me, reaching that level was not easy. I think I had the full support of the founders, and they saw, what I was able to bring to the organization because they were passing on a legacy. And I actually took over from a paternal type of approach to now, I'm able not only was able to reach the C-suite level, but also to keep it,
Yes.
Because that's also another challenge because there are forces that would try to challenge your abilities and decisions and undermine some of your approaches or vision. And I think I've been very clear on that, on where I want to position the organization and also demonstrate results. But as far as the organization as a whole, CAB's admin staff is 90% women. Executive staff have been 100% women since 2013 when I took over as the executive director and then became the CEO, which I'm pushing now possibly for president, but that's up in the air. The executive staff advocates for competitive, fair market compensation for all organizational roles, which are mainly women. So it's very important for me to stand strong, not only to debate and fight for myself, but at the same time, I have 10,000 others behind me who's going to look at the decisions that I make, not only for myself, but for them as well.
Yeah, that's great. The presidency is up in the air, but it's not far reaching. So
that's right. That's right.
Ma'am, I know you just got here right in time for the pause, but have you noticed any specific programs designed to elevate women to the C-suite, or what do you think?
Yeah, I was particularly impressed and quite frankly attracted to New York Presbyterian in particular because of the strong women leaders who are in place. And like Art described, many of our senior most leaders are women. And particularly physician women leaders, which I was especially impressed with. I think we also have very robust programs around physician and leadership development that if you look at the representation, often it's the majority of women who are participating in those programs. So I think inherent in that, as we see more women graduating from health policy programs, from MBA schools, from medical schools, from nursing schools, more and more of the leadership is starting to reflect that. I think Shirley brings up a great point around compensation, that as we start collecting more data, we talk a lot about patient level data, but we also now are collecting employee level data. Yeah. And when we start doing the analytics on that, we can begin to see where we have internal inequities across a host of dimensions. And I hate to say it, but we continue to see that particularly for women. Mm-hmm. And so we are very committed to making sure we have equitable pay for all employees, particularly I think leadership is where you have to be particularly careful and thoughtful. I think it's also a space where women generally don't advocate for themselves. So in my personal conversation with women leaders, I often tell them you must negotiate. And part of strong negotiation is knowing where the guardrails are. And I'm amazed how many people don't do the homework of knowing where those guardrails of compensation in particular, or the complexities of benefit packages, and really educating oneself around that. Of course, we have the formal development programs in the various leadership academies, which again, I think women are well represented. I think the more challenging pieces are the informal structures, right? Where you get opportunities because you knew the right person. Well, how do you, in the famous words of Hamilton, get in the room where the decisions are made?
Yes.
And that's the piece we have to break through of how do we establish sponsorships and mentorships that get us into those positions of power in leadership and management, where are really hard ceilings to break. And I am really honored that NYP brought me in, partly because of sponsors there who said, you know, we know Pam's work, we've seen her at other institutions, in other committees, national committees, and helped pave a way to lay some groundwork. But I think more of us have to know kind of how to go about that. And then finally, let me say, I think an area getting heightened attention on, and appropriately so, is the placement of women and underrepresented minorities on boards. And in the healthcare space, I think we have not broken this ceiling yet, right? If you look at the majority of boards, they still tend to be overwhelmingly male and overwhelmingly white males. And particularly when boards don't have a term limit, you see, even when the leadership team is reflective of the population they're serving, that board isn't necessarily. And so I'm sure many of you are starting to get called now to serve on not-for-profit boards, for-profit boards, public boards, corporate boards, because they recognize that the leadership, which ultimately is the board, has to have a stake in the ground around diversity, inclusion, and equity across all of the frameworks that we're talking about tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think with regard to, you know, preparation and support for women to move into the C-suite, negotiation strategies and negotiation skills should be part of that development process. That's a good point that you brought up there. You talked a little bit about mentoring, Pam. How do you make the most of a mentoring relationship?
Yeah, you know, I'm always amazed how often this question is asked. One, let me say, I think it's important that not only do you serve as a mentor, but you also should be mentored yourself, right? No matter how high one thinks that they've achieved in their professional development. I think I'm sorry, you asked, how do you effectively be mentor or be a mentor?
No, what do you do to make the most of a mentoring relationship? It can be either way.
Yeah, I think you have to go into the mentoring relationship with an agreement between the mentor and mentee of what do you want to talk about? What do you want to share? How will you work together? I think you have to be very intentional about time together. I most appreciate when I'm mentoring someone when they come in with questions or an agenda and realize that time is valuable. I'm on both sides of that equation and come in well prepared to ask questions. I think to have a truly powerful mentoring relationship, it should be someone who sees the work that you do so that they can provide to you constructive feedback on what they observed, as opposed to speaking very theoretically. So my experiences have been, my best mentors have been the ones who have said to me, you know, you really flubbed on that presentation. Let's talk about how you could have done a better job. And the best of mentors have said, in fact, come to my office and redo the presentation, and I'll walk you through where your opportunities. Those have been the most enlightening experiences. And quite frankly, those people who will speak truth to you, who do it gently and do it, you know, with support and love, but who will tell you honestly where you stand. And I often join the distinction between mentors and sponsors, although they can overlap. You need sponsors in your career as well. And those sponsors in some ways are distinct from mentors in that they're the people who can remove bridges and barriers for you, and who may or may not know your specific work, who may just only know of you, which is why it's so important that your excellence in your outcomes can speak for themselves, so that those sponsors who are looking from afar can help position you into places that you never would have imagined. And again, I think mentors and sponsors working together, I mean, that's just even more powerful when you have people in your corner.
Mm-hmm. Art, what has been your experience around mentoring or coaching? And what do you think may be more effective, the coaching or the mentoring, if there's a difference?
So I think both are important, and they serve different roles. I think as Pamela was saying, it's important, particularly at the stages of our respective careers, where we give back by mentoring. And I think it's also important that at whatever stage of career you're at, that you seek out mentorship. So you have somebody who you can go to get honest feedback about what it is that you're doing, or is willing to give you that kind of honest feedback without fear. Sometimes the practical reality is when you get to high enough positions organizationally, people are afraid to give you feedback. So, you have to find the right people who aren't, and who are really willing to tell it like it is. And I've been very fortunate in that regard personally. And I try to do that. I try to return that, give that back by serving in a mentorship position when members of my staff or members of people that I have networked with over the years come to me for that kind of support or that kind of help. And because I do think it's important to give back that way. Coaching is a little bit different in that you can see coaching in a number of, and being effective in a number of different realms. So for example, we utilize coaching in building up the skills, for example, of our nurse managers. So I have process improvement coaches who work with our nurse managers to improve their skill sets, their capabilities, their abilities to be able to drive change. We have coaches that are deployed to work with staff to help them to see that how they could improve the experience of our patients. We have coaches that are hired specifically to provide feedback for executives. In these instances, I would say that the main, they're not the same. Mentorship tends to be derived from some sort of pre-existing relationship. It could be, professional relationship. You could be friends or colleagues. But there's some way you know one another, which sort of facilitates the mentor-mentee relationship. You can have that as a coach or not. You can be specifically trained to be a coach, and the coach is somebody who's going to give what you're doing an objective look, but is also there to try to guide you to do certain things. So for example, we have coaches in the Mount Sinai Health System who are there to help managers to think about how they can undertake process improvement. We have coaches who we actually train our managers in turn to engage their frontline staff in a coaching relationship where they're trying to coach their frontline staff to solve problems that they might otherwise typically come back to management to try to solve on their behalf. So we try to actually convert the old model of management into a model that is much more centered around coaching. So again, I would make the argument that mentorship, there's some sort of pre-existing relationship between mentor and mentee that exists, and the feedback and the interaction can be very broad. It can be about a whole bunch of things. It can be about career. It can be about balancing work and home life. It can be about specific issues or challenges that one is facing at work. Coaching, I think, is a set of skills that can be taught to people at a variety of different levels within the organization, and you use coaching as a means of pulling the best out of people in attempting to solve problems, drive change, move the organization forward. Both are important, but the skill sets are different, and the people who can serve those roles sometimes are different as well.
Excellent. Shirley, you've had a very unique experience to the C-suite. Was there an opportunity for mentoring or coaching that you feel you can share that was positive in helping you move forward?
I think with my transition from the different roles I had at CABS from when I started in 2006, I can honestly say that I was coached by the president at the time. And it's so funny because I actually skipped the executive director at the time and went straight to the president, because at the time I was pursuing my master's. And I think that's where I think Arthur kind of explained it well. I had a pre-existing relationship with the president at the time, who was the executive director, who was appointed a president, so who actually hired me actually when I first started at CABS. So the mentorship that existed between myself and the president was a good one. And it remained until the president actually retired. So what I learned from that is how I modeled what I experienced and to give back to my staff, especially being at the level that I am. My level of mentoring is daily. I'm not coaching. I would pretty much discuss how supervisors and managers need to address a specific staff, but my mentoring is daily. And I made sure one attributes that I use is to be a good listener. Whether it's my internal staff or home attendant who come to visit. I think one of the things that they appreciate is that they can trust me, whether they recognize that I am the CEO, but they have a level of comfort and trust that they can speak to me and I will mentor them on the right path, or whatever they may think that they need assistance or my help with. In support at times, I am there. I think for me as a mentee, I always use my husband as the person that I go to, and I agree with Pamela. He tells me the truth. He pretty much would tell me what I shouldn't do and what I should do. So I always have a focus on what I need, and he would guide me onto the right path or direction that I need to go to, because he knows once I have a plan on what I need to achieve, once he puts me on it, I'm headstrong and I'm focused in getting it done. And usually I get it done. So there is a difference, and I agree with Arthur and as well as Pamela. And for me, I am a mentor on a daily basis as a role model for my staff.
Mm-hmm. In this new normal, through this coronavirus pandemic, how do you maintain relationships and remain connected with the team members and staff in this virtual environment? I know as a pastor, we have it was hard work to really do virtual services. Mm-hmm. You know, we have to really try to reach through the computer to make sure that we actually connect. Can each of you talk about how you remain connected? What do you do in this new normal environment of the virtual world? Art, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I would say, you know, when we first shifted to virtual meetings, right? There was a novelty to it. You could, it certainly cut down on travel time. It made things, you know, you could meet with hundreds of people across your organization in a frictionless way. You know, you didn't have to worry about any of the logistics of meeting organization. You just had to send out a Zoom address, and basically you were done. And you know, and there are some those virtues persist, but over time, you know, it most definitely has gotten more and more challenging because, you know, humans are social beings, and the reality is that no matter how many people are on a Zoom call, it's not the same as being in a room with other human beings. In fact, I remember a couple of months ago, I was doing hosting a meeting, and one of the people who was going to be attending said, "Hey, do you want to come down to one of our hospitals? Do you want to do it by Zoom?" And I said, "You want to know something? I want to go to the hospital. I want to get out. I want to go to a place. I want to see other people." And you know, yes, again, it's not quite the same as it was, or hopefully will be once the vaccine is widely disseminated. But it was different and important to have those human connections. So how do you continue to forge that? Well, one, I think you have to check in on your team, even if it's virtually. You just have to do that. So, you know, persist in having the one-on-ones with your team. Have smaller group meetings so that you can discuss a variety of different topics. Don't lose sight or track of people because you don't see them face to face. So that's number one. Number two, depending upon the organization that you're in, try to work in some in-person connection, even if it is required to be socially distanced. So, you know, my hospital, for example, you know, make sure that you're round, make sure that the occasional meeting is one that's in person. If you could do a one-to-one in your office where you can be more than 6 feet apart, you know, do it. If you could meet outside, meet outside. You know, in other words, leverage what's available to us to persist in trying to make those interpersonal connections as the days, weeks, and months go by before we have a vaccine. And then third, have fun. So this wasn't even my idea, but I'll share it. You know, a colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine, she had emailed to check in, and she says, "Why don't we do virtual cocktails?" So basically, it was sort of after hours. You know, the obligation was each of us had to have a drink of something, and you know, again, it was the idea of trying to recreate at least partially, you know, what you would do normally. Yes, through the interface of a computer screen. But it was different. It was fun. It was using the tools and the technology in a way that also created a connection. So I think, you know, we're going to be at this for a while still. You know, even with the vaccine starting to come out by the end of the year, you know, the practical reality is we're not going to get widespread dissemination of the vaccines until well into next year, probably at the end of the summer. And even then, you know, the vaccines will not have fully suppressed the virus. We're still going to have to do some of the things that we're doing now until we see really, really strong suppression of the virus. So I think we're looking at most of next year, even, you know, still having to engage through social distancing and through the utilization of masks. So we're going to be at this a while. So we have to, you know, make sure to nourish that part of our souls that requires the interconnection with other human beings as best as we can until we get that point. But last point I want to make is we have to remain vigilant about this. You know, the fear that I have, and we're about to get into this season, right, is that we're a week away from Thanksgiving, 5 weeks away from the Christmas holidays, 6 weeks away from New Year's. People are tired. They don't want to do this anymore. I don't either. None of us do. They hear the vaccine is out there, but instead of kind of sort of redoubling efforts, say, okay, I just have a little bit more to do, to go. It's more like, okay, we're going to be safe. It's going to be okay. And the mask comes down over your nose and you're not socially distanced anymore. We have a cath lab, a cardiac cath lab in our hospital. We had to furlough 30 nurses and techs because there was an outbreak. One person got COVID and had been in contact in ways that weren't consistent with the rules, and 30 people had to go out for 2 weeks.
Wow.
It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much. And that, what I described, is happening all over the country. So we have to remain vigilant and try to be creative in how we engage one another to get us through this period, to when the vaccines take hold, the virus is suppressed, and we can start to return to some sense of normalcy.
You mentioned having fun. I had sent out a Zoom invitation to my team for a wind down, and I got 3 calls. You spelling correction. You put an E and not a D. Said, no, wine. Gotta come with a glass of wine. Pam, Cheryl, you want to talk about what you're doing to stay connected in the virtual?
Sure. I would say this is particularly hard for me because I love connecting with people, right? I'm the consummate extrovert. I get my energy from talking to other people. My love language is touch. I love to hug. I love to say hello. And I'm the jovial personality. So this is tough. But I agree with Art's point that you got to get creative here. I will say, and at YP, we have no tolerance right now for all the reasons you described for in-person activity. If we can avoid being together, then we must not be together. And then when we are together, we obviously need to be fully masked and constantly protecting ourselves. But that being said, just to highlight a couple of things that I've tried to do a little differently. I've taken on the art of some old-fashioned things. I'm starting to write handwritten notes, right? Again, to people, the art of letter writing, and how special it is for someone to receive a letter in the mail, believe it or not. Now, of course, when the US Post Service slowed down, it's not quite as effective. So the art of giving a letter. I've also sent little gifts to people on their birthdays for anniversaries, celebrations. We were celebrating people who had 20 plus years of service recently, sending them flowers and bouquets. Yes, I did some of that before, but I'm being very mindful of doing that to be very personalized. And I think continuing, as Art said, Arthur, sorry, your one-on-ones and just leaving room for personal conversation as opposed to talking about work, and trying to be thoughtful about reading cues from people, right? If you can see someone's had enough, and I think most of us are pretty attuned to that, just say, you know what, let's not talk about work right now. How you doing? How's your mom doing? How's your family doing? You'll learn a lot. People are suffering with their own personal losses, our employees. And they need to vent. They need to, some people need help coping, and to be able to connect them to resources to get that. So I think we have to be really mindful of subtle signs that people are suffering from a mental health perspective. So those are some of the things. And I think, I'm having great joy watching some teams who do kind of contests with backgrounds, their virtual backgrounds, or contests with celebrations. I'm not that creative, but it's fun to watch other people be much more creative around that.
Yeah, we talk about being intentional in this environment. So I want to ask each of you, what led you to a career in healthcare? And when did you become intentional about seeking the C-suite? What led you to healthcare, and when did you become intentional about seeking the C-suite?
So I'll just pick up really quickly. I decided to go in healthcare by accident, right? I was actually pursuing a PhD in political science. And I was starting to write my dissertation, and said, uh-oh, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I didn't want to write and I didn't want to teach. And so I figured I better find a new career. And this is, again, power of connection and meeting people. I met an incredible woman who said, why don't you come work for me at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina? And I said, sure. And I ended up having a wonderful boss who served as a mentor there, who said, look, if you want to, pursue healthcare further, you really need an advanced degree in healthcare. So I chose the public health program, which I absolutely loved. I went to Yale School of Public Health, and it was the best experience ever. It was the perfect degree for me. It married policy and management. And then I pursued a fellowship. We were having a conversation with someone earlier who I persuaded to take a fellowship, and the fellowship was absolutely life-changing for me in that it showed me what the provider side looked like. I had had a lot of experience in pharmaceuticals, insurance companies, and so that was incredibly helpful. And I just, over the course of my career, have had promotional opportunities. In fact, I joke at Duke, I was there for 17 years, but had 9 different jobs while there. And that was a real privilege because I got to see a full range of opportunities. I bring that up to say, I never thought about the C-suite. I was not one of those people who knew exactly where I wanted to go, how I wanted to get there, and said, tell me how to be a CEO, tell me how to be a COO. Instead, it happened organically, which in many ways was much more rewarding. What I tried to focus on during my professional development was, what are the skills I need to learn? Like, what am I missing in my toolkit? And it ranged from my interpersonal skills as well as my tactical skills. So in my career progression, there were times I took lateral moves because I knew taking a lateral move would teach me something new. And I didn't make a dime more. Some people even said, what are you doing? That's going to be, you're regressing. But I said, I'm learning how to run ORs. And I know at some point in my life, knowing how to run ORs is going to be critical. Right. And sure enough, right. It was. And if you can run an OR, you can just about run anything. And likewise, it gave, people used to call me the utility player, bring Pam in to fix something. And so I love that reputation, right? Like, okay, they know I can turn something around, and just, you begin to build on that. So I think many of us get very fixated on the next level. How do I get to the next level? Instead of thinking about what is it that I need to learn to make me a better leader? And then the jobs and the opportunities come after that. And quite frankly, in this day and age, forget the titles, right? Nobody knows what I do, right? I have to always explain, what is an SVP and regional COO? Quite frankly, my friends who said, why are you going to be a COO? You used to be a CEO. And I said, well, now I'm responsible for 7 million people, not 400,000. And then they get it. So
yes, yeah, great answer.
I think I would. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm saying sure.
Oh, yeah, I think I agree with Bob with Pamela, because to be honest, it wasn't intentional. I think it happened for me also organically, but you have to gradually, acquire certain skills, because you may show that it looks easy for people, because I think that's the whole idea. They see you in that role. They say, well, I could do that. But it requires, an accumulation of experience and the ability to deal with crisis, as we're all dealing with this crisis now. How do you pivot to run an operation like myself? Especially for us, the part that we do, we actually deliver the service at home. And we have frontline workers who are going to service the elderly and the disabled, and some who may have contracted the virus and they're discharged from the hospital, from Mount Sinai or any hospital. We have to, again, be able to deal with crisis when you're in the roles that we have. For me, I was driven by wanting to do something in the community. Being socially conscious, I think for me, drove my interest in this area. I went to Hunter College and I majored in sociology and minor in psych. And gradually I, sought different avenues to develop my skills. And when the time presented itself, then I was prepared to take on the roles. But it's not easy. But like Pamela said, there are times you have to take different roles just to gain the experience. And that really is what helps you to be able to navigate some of the difficult decisions and issues that you have to face along the way.
Mark?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I share with Pamela the fact that I started out my career after getting my undergraduate degree, pursuing a PhD in political science. I was going to teach political science. And I realized quickly enough that I did not want to teach political science, and that for a career, and that I didn't want to be competing with 500 people for every academic job that was available. So I said, this isn't going to work. And what I ended up doing is I ended up coming back to Long Island and getting involved in local politics and local government. And what I ended up doing was getting myself slotted into positions where basically I was a professional municipal manager in an arena where there were not many professional municipal managers. So I was able to craft kind of a unique set of qualifications that put me in a unique category when people were seeking that skill set. I had no competition, basically, right? Limited competition. I got my first break, I'll be honest with you, because I was working for a supervisor of a town, and I was working for her deputy, and she was an incredibly accomplished legislator and an incredibly accomplished member of the state assembly, brilliant orator, brilliant speechwriter, who just was not a particularly good administrator. And her deputy was her administrator, and he left, and she didn't really replace his function. So I was relatively young. I was in my mid-20s. I walked into her office and I said, I can do that job, and I can help you. And I was fortunate in her saying, yeah, you can. And let's give you the title and let's go. So I got a very early break in that regard. I was working for county government, and I did turnaround work with a focus in finance and a focus in municipal management and budgeting, public finance. And the county was affiliated with the public hospital. And the consultants that the county had hired came to me and they said, listen, we want you to consider running the public hospital. Because you can manage, you can run things, and we can teach you what you don't know, but we need somebody who has your managerial skill sets, has your understanding of the local government, a local array of governments, and the local politics to be able to navigate this hospital. It was very challenging. So I originally thought they were nuts, and I said, this is way over my, I'm way over my skis on this. But then I thought about it and I said, you know what? How many times in your life does somebody basically hand you the keys to the car and say, go drive it? You don't usually get that opportunity. So I consider myself quite blessed in having even been offered that opportunity. So I said, I'm going to take it. I'm going to make something of it, because it was a hospital that served poor people principally. And it got too mired in politics and not focused enough on delivering high quality care to people who needed it. So I felt like, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And so that's what I did, or I tried to do. And I think we did a lot of really good work in that process. And it put me in a position where once you're in that position and you're successful, then you're going to be recruited for other C-suite type positions. And that's exactly what happened here. eventually I was asked to interview for a position at Mount Sinai, and I left my prior hospital, particularly when the politics changed, and that they wanted somebody different anyway, and the opportunity at Mount Sinai opened up. I would say then, to directly answer your question, I didn't per se, and I never at any time had in my head I'm going to be in the C-suite. I got into government because I wanted to help people, and one thing led to another, and I got the opportunity to do that, as opposed to I sought the opportunity to do that. So again, that's why my approach to my job has always been one of being, I think, appropriately humble. I don't consider myself any more deserving than anybody else to be in the position that I'm in. I was able to marry, hopefully, a good, solid skill set of skills with opportunity that not everybody, frankly, has. And again, that's why I'm particularly humble about that sort of thing. But didn't seek it, but took the chance when the chance was given. And that is something that I would say to the folks that are in this participating in this forum. Sometimes you have to take a couple of chances with your career, and they may not work, all right? But if you don't take the chance, you're not going to get to the sort of the greater goal. So your risks should be calculated. Your risk taking shouldn't be just simply for the sake of it. You should be thoughtful, but occasionally you have to take chances with your career in order to get where you would like to go. And I also think, and everyone on this and everybody on this panel has demonstrated this today, I think, you have to. Somebody said to me the other day that they have a teacher who tells them that they really got to focus on, getting as many things, on their resume as you can, getting as many boxes to check. And I said, you know what? I read a lot of resumes, and that, I know how resumes are compiled. I know the words that people use. That's not it. Like, I don't look for that. I don't look for how many accomplishments one has under one's title, because those are self-curated. I mean, you're putting them there on your own. What I look for is, what's that thing that you uniquely do that's just different about you and how you approach your job and your work? What's that thing that you just uniquely and singularly bring to the table? What's your independent value? And I think if you ask yourself that question, it's a challenging question, because sometimes you can't come up with anything, or sometimes it's not what you think it is. But you really want to hone in on that answer to that question, because that's what's ultimately going to help make your case to a prospective employer about your possibility of being the person for that role that they're looking to fill. What is it that you do that's unique, that's different, that's singular, that's independent from what anybody else does who's done the kind of work that you do? Challenging question to ask, not always easy to answer, but I think an important question to answer, because I think that's far more valuable than all of the bullets under your title on a resume.
Yeah, thank you, Art. I did want to ask you about, how do you balance work-life balance and your personal life? But I think during this time, we don't have any balance. So I think I'd like to go to the chat room and ask a couple of questions that have come in from our audience. To the women on this panel, do you face resistance from men when you're leading them? And how do you navigate such hurdles?
So I think at times, yes. And I think you ignore it. And maybe I'm getting tired, but I think you just keep doing your job. It's their problem. And you hold them accountable. The expectation is that, you're clear with your expectations. You are who you are. You're in your role for a reason. And you hold them accountable to their performance, and you keep it moving. I think it is very distracting when people are intentionally, they gaslight, right? They know what triggers to push. And I think it's true for race as well. To me, success is the best revenge. And I am very clear when I work with leaders, here are what our expectations are. We're going to together get there and hopefully inspire and create enthusiasm to accomplish those things with which the organization thinks is important. But we're not going to get distracted by someone's hangups. Now, that being said, if it becomes problematic and it becomes personal, we are going to have a crucial conversation about the impacts of those behaviors. But usually this day and age, I don't think you see kind of that outright overt approach by most people. Most of them are wise enough now to kind of try to cover it up a bit. But.
Well, I would say, Pamela, we may have one or two. I think I wouldn't take away anything from what you just said. I dealt with a character like that. And I think you are absolutely right. You ignore them, you focus on your task at hand, because success is the biggest revenge. So I would say that they're not around, they're still around. And usually they realize whatever it is that their goals to cause disruption or division or whatever their goals are, you try not to focus on that because that is going to derail your focus. So you're absolutely right, Pamela. You ignore them, you know what your focus is on your goals, especially again, for myself or anybody else who's listening, if you have a particular goal, you stick to it. Don't let anyone distract you from achieving it.
And let me say, I just taught a class on a panel on microaggressions. So I want to be clear. If I feel like a microaggression is being inflicted upon me, and it is one that I want to address, I will address it. So I don't want anybody to think that you should ignore a microaggression that is real. But part of tackling microaggressions is knowing when is an appropriate time to address it and when it's not.
That's correct. That's correct. And I think bringing it to light, I think it's another approach.
Yes.
Because others who are witnessing that kind of behavior is a way for you to put that in check.
Totally agree.
I have another question for the women. Have the women on the panel experienced higher expectations in their work performance than their counterparts of different nationalities? Were they held, and how many did they address or do it? Okay, so we'll just go with, have you had that experience of being held to a higher performance than your counterpart in different nationalities? And Art, they do say, Art can answer this one as well, as he may have experienced that too. But we'll hear from our women panelists first, and then Art, you can join in.
So I would say it's more self-imposed pressure to perform better. I have never felt like someone else has imposed a higher standard on me than anyone else. It's been my own personal pressure to perform at a higher level. And I think that comes from the whole imposter syndrome thing, right? Of saying, well, maybe I really wasn't the best qualified, or how did I get picked and not someone else? And the need to prove that, in fact, I can live up to those expectations. I would say the only time I felt that remotely challenged is when I am not a clinician. And oftentimes as a non-clinician leading clinicians, it can be a bit challenging to have the background of a clinician. And sometimes there's some pressure there, or kind of a weird power dynamic that happens in that space. But overall, I don't think that there's been imposed pressure to perform at a higher standard.
Likewise, myself, I think it is self-imposed. I think I've put much more pressure on myself than the board, because I have the board who I report to. I actually set the goals for the organization. They're amazed at times to see it, but sometimes I have to really discuss the need to go in that direction. So it's really going against what my level of achievements. And sometimes, if you don't write down the level of achievements that you have accomplished, you tend to not, realize the time and efforts and everyone else who supported the road to your success, or the road to the organization's success, is to actually document your level of achievements. So yes, I would say for myself as well, it is self-imposed. No one has been able to compare what I've been able to do with anybody else.
Thank you.
Yeah, my experience is that women put far more pressure on themselves to perform at the highest level, frankly, A, that men do, and that B, that men put on women. I think women are harder on themselves.
Okay. And the last question in the chat before we come to close: as mega systems form in the New York area, there are less C-suite seats with people of color. What is an appropriate strategy for leadership to represent the people that we serve? And what advice would you give the audience to advocate within their roles? We talked a little bit about that earlier, but.
Well, I'll start. So yes, I think it's a great and important observation that you're seeing significant consolidation within the healthcare industry, not just here in New York, but across the country. And it changes the dynamic, and it changes the kinds of positions that are going to be available. So yes, on the one hand, there are less C-suite, like top of the organization, C-suite positions that are going to be available by definition, but there are many, many, many positions of significant authority within health systems that will be available. It's just a different structure, and in many respects, the span of control of these kinds of positions would be broader than if you were talking about, and more interesting than if you're talking about, say, being in the C-suite of a standalone hospital. So I think systemness and the consolidation of the industry actually creates opportunities, varying opportunities for slotting into positions of significant authority and being able to maneuver your career in a number of different ways. So I just think you have to think about it a little bit differently. That's number one. Number two, I really do think it's important that all of these organizations are conscious about creating not only a diverse table of organization, but also creating pipelines for advancement within the organization. So, one of the challenges is going to be that if you're outside of one of the big systems and you're trying to get in, sometimes the big systems recruit from outside. That's definitely true. But many of the big systems, particularly the more mature ones, want to develop their own talent. And so, it's very important that if you have a system that's organizing itself like the latter, it's a more mature system trying to be able to build pipelines for talent development and advancement. It's very important that A, they have robust systems and strategies to do that, and B, that you have awareness as somebody who works within that system and position yourself to be able to take advantage of that. Each organization is different. Each system is going to have its own approach. It's just very important to learn what those approaches are. And, it's important to try to figure out how you can leverage what exists, the systems that do exist, the processes that do exist, the pipeline opportunities that do exist for your own career advancement. It's certainly easier with most of the time within a system to be able to advance. Last point I want to make though is that sometimes you realize that I've had at least 2 people on my team at Mount Sinai Morningside who fit this bill. They were identified as high potential performers. They were invested in, but in each of their cases, they were in big system where they ran into a wall and they couldn't get out. Like they just couldn't maneuver their way through it. So they did the right thing in those instances and said, you know what, I've done everything I can here and I need to find an opportunity within another system. And, you know, and that's put them in a good position for growth. And I just want to make one last point. It's really incumbent upon people in leadership positions, in C-suite positions, to recognize that your role when you've reached that juncture in your career is to think about the careers of the people who report to you and to help them to cultivate their careers. Because, you know, and I say this to my team all of the time, the easiest thing for me is if everybody worked for me in the positions that they're in for as long as I'm in the position that I'm in, which is an incredibly selfish way of thinking about it. And of course, it's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is that I've got really talented people because I've done a damn good job recruiting them. And I need to see them advance. I want them to advance as far as they can. And they're going to reach a point where I can't help them advance their career while they're working for me. I've done everything I could. So I need now to work with them to get them to the next level, wherever it is that they want to be. And I think people who are in positions like I'm in have an obligation to do that. And also that's actually part of the fun of the job, is to, you know, find those people who really have it and then figure out how to get them in positions where they can just spread their wings and take it all to the next level.
Well, I think also is to keep an environment that is a learning environment, a teaching environment. And I think that sets the tone for staff who want to continue to pursue something else or increase their skills. And I agree with Arthur. I think, you know, the type of individuals that we recruit in certain roles, one of the things that I look for is someone that has cross skills. Because of some of the things that we're doing. You know, I'm leading a 4 years young organization, and I have different sets of generation of workers. So in order for us to move with the evolution of some of the services that we want to deliver, some of the programs we want to develop, you need to have the right set of employees to help you do that. Yes, you can bring consultants in to kind of help you move projects along, but you want to have individuals who can carry out a task and be able to help you achieve some of the goals that you have, for whether or not it's a department, it's an organization. I think cross skills is something to have. And I think, Arthur, you mentioned your background, and for me, and anybody else who's listening, you have to be able to manage different departments. You know, as a health system like Mount Sinai, if you don't have those level of skills, it's hard for you to manage certain roles under you. And I think if you can encourage individuals to go to school, to continue to pursue certain type of, you know, whether it's programs or whatever that can enhance what they do, it's always a plus for the organization. Likewise, myself, even though I am in the role that I hold, I still want to, you know, remain fresh and keep my information ready to discuss with my director of business operation or my director of nursing. It's important to keep your environment fresh and know exactly when you do have talents that you either have that you want to cultivate, but also the ones that you bring into the organization. It is, I think, for the betterment for, the success of the organization or the institution.
Pam?
I don't think I have much more to add. I think we've talked about just about every component. I will just reiterate, really try hard not to get fixated on a title, right? The C-suite of today is not the C-suite of yesteryear. And even though we have more systemness and more corporatization of services, some of those roles span an enterprise that is much larger than a CEO's scope of responsibility in a small community. So just be mindful. And I echo both of my colleagues' points of what's the skill set you want to build. That's far more important than the title you want to achieve.
So just to close on a personal note, I want to ask you, who has had the most influence on you as you were growing up on your world view? You just name the person. You don't have to give an explanation, but just name that person. It'll give us a little idea about who you are.
I'll go first. I'll defer to my late mother, who had the most influence on me. For example, respecting of oneself, family and relationships. I live with those guiding principles, and they become my cornerstone on how I deal with people, how I see people. So that's what I would say to who was who was the most influential on me in my growing up and who I am today. It's as a result of my late mother.
Great, thank you. Pam?
Miss Edith Howard, my fourth grade teacher, who forced me to do public speaking exercises in community competitions. And that public speaking was more critical than I would have ever have guessed throughout my career. To be able to stand in front of a group of people, and the more senior you are in an organization, the more you have to do it. And so I'm very grateful for that. And the first speech was at an Omega Psi Phi lecture opportunity class at Morgan State University, where I had to deliver a speech.
All right.
So my parents, clearly, and I mean, I think that goes without saying in terms of shaping values and shaping interests. My father was interested in, it was a philosophy professor, and he was interested in government and politics. And my mother was a nurse. And so somehow, my career ends up overlapping all of their sort of original interests in some form or fashion. My father was a teacher, and I started out wanting to teach, got way away from that. Now I teach as part of what it is that I do professionally. So I think it all anchors back to parents. And then I would also say, in my particular case, there was I went to St. John's University as an undergraduate. There was a priest who was the moderator of a community or service organization that I participated in. And he doggedly pursued me from when I was a sophomore to run the organization. And I really didn't think I had what it took to do it. And I finally assented in my senior year. And so, and I don't know what it is that he saw, but he clearly saw that I had the capability of leading an organization. And I tell people all of the time, your collegiate organizations, they're made of small budgets. It may be practice, but you know what? It's good practice, because it teaches you a lot of what you need to know, and it gives you the confidence that you need to have if you're going to actually lead people in the real world. So again, I think my parents clearly, and this particular priest who moderated this particular organization for seeing something in me that I did not at the time see.
Great. I have one comment that went into the chat, and it's just some words of wisdom for us before we close. Don't limit the Black population health outcomes to social determinants of health only. The majority of individuals who worked on the subway were Black. They have union plans, pensions, and salaries of 60 grand or above. Prince George County, outside of DC, is an affluent Black community and have had the highest COVID deaths in the area. Brooklyn has 3 public hospitals, 1 state, and multiple private hospitals, and they have had the highest death rate in New York City. We need to obtain data on Black acronyms, all sociology and economic groups. Shirley, AKA Miss D, Pamela Sutton-Wallace, and Arthur Gianelli, it was my honor to facilitate this conversation. Continue to lead and be a great example for those coming behind you to stand on your shoulders. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you
Phenomenal.
very
Thank
much,
you.
Barbara. Thank you.
So my name is Jay Fergus. I'm the president-elect. I would like to echo what Barbara said in terms of thank you. This was an amazing, amazing event tonight. And I want to extend a warm welcome, warm thank you, excuse me, to our amazing moderator, Barbara. You did fabulous. It was absolutely wonderful. And our guest panelists, like Barbara said, the knowledge and experience you shared tonight made it very meaningful for all of us, especially our members and our guests. And we really thank you again for your generous time and sharing your valuable time with us. I would like to also close by letting everyone know we have another professional development program that we're going to be doing, virtual event, that is going to be December the 15th. If you love what you heard tonight, we're going to have even more industry leaders like them to share how to develop your brand and taking your career to the next level. We're also going to be doing an executive award presentation, which, by the way, we're still accepting nominations for Young and Senior Award. It's our event that we do every year to honor our senior and our young careerists, healthcare administrators in our membership. So please, if you haven't done it, you have till November the 20th to do it. And that is pretty much it. I would like to close by saying thank you again. And Art, I remember you from you and I go back, so it was really great to see you as well tonight too, as well as you, Pam, too. Thanks again, also Miss D for attending as well. So if there's anything else, everything is good. I think we're closed for the night.
Well, I want to say something to Art, actually. There's someone that I know that he knows who actually told me that he had a secretary named Sanja. Hopefully he remembered who that person was, who was his secretary for a long time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So a cousin of hers actually is there to tell you to say greeting for her. Since I was scheduled to talk to be on the panel with you, so she wanted me to express that to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Say hello back. Thank you.
And Art, do you remember me from the time that I worked with you for medical?
I do. I do. Absolutely.
Absolutely. You guys were so wonderful tonight. And I know our members, as they're closing off, saying, and I thank you, everyone. I know you are really enjoying what was shared with us tonight. Pam, I'm just like you. I'm so warm and I can't take this. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm with you on that, Pam. I'm with you on that. Thank you again.
Well, warm hugs.
Exactly. We'll be able to do that soon, right?
Right.
Everyone,
Thank you all.
have a great night.
Good night.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everyone.
You too.